This is corruption in the court system, manifested in such a high-profile case. This is corruption in media and the power that it has to mislead when the people are not awake enough to hold it to standards. And it has society on display. This case shows us that people will believe anything that they're told, even as the facts say something else. And people will fall for the agendas as they come at us left and right. So yes, this needs to be fought. And this topic is no less than any other. People are still learning that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I know a lot of people thought in 2018 justice was served. But no, this thing isn't quite over. Not yet. Well. What has long been predicted has come to pass. Let me start this video out with a warning. If you are an emotional ideologue, indoctrinated by the movements of the day, then the truth, factual information, evidence, logic, and reason is clearly not for you. And so I would advise not watching this video because it will irritate you. Just go off and running with the next corporate hashtag. But for those who are interested in the truth, and you want to know the whole truth, including what mainstream media platforms have been strategically hiding from you to protect a false narrative, let's go down the rabbit hole and explain why Bill Cosby's case was overturned and why this is only the beginning. For those who already know this information, not all, but a lot of this will be more of the same things you've heard already. But for the brainwashed masses and any new people finally getting this far and finding this information, prepare to have your mind blown. I've been saying this for nearly 6 years. They have been lying to you, and you have been sold a sham. Now that Bill Cosby's conviction has been overturned, mainstream media platforms have been on a blitz doing damage control. They lost big time. And now they're desperately trying to reframe and control the narrative again and recover from this major setback. That's why you hear them lying even more and scrambling and making sure that they tell you the conviction being overturned is it's a technicality or a procedural hiccup. False, yet again. This successful appeal was the result of devilish prosecutorial misconduct because they had an unwinnable case and basically, in a nutshell, rigged the case to force a conviction. This was no technicality. 6 years later, they still foolishly think they're going to get away with the deception they've been pulling. They're not. And it's going to be big. I warned years ago that because of what the media and the courts have done, and because of how famous Mr. Cosby was, and yes, because of his race, this case was historically relevant, and that the inevitable was coming. Someday soon, this case will be looked at as one of the biggest media deceptions and corrupt court cases in American history. This is Jack Johnson level. I've been at this since day one. Mark my words again. The smoke is clearing already. Now, let's talk freely about what many media outlets refused to tell you. Let's just say it flat out. Andrea Constand is a liar. Mainstream media will never say that because they've been protecting her and all the accusers. Make no mistake, this was not about attacking anybody or victim shaming or anything like that. This was all about telling the truth against all odds. And I've made several videos showing people explicitly how many of these accusers got caught in lies and they've been discredited by evidence, or that many of them didn't even have reasonable, believable, or legitimate rape cases. This is just the facts. This is not rhetoric or opinion. But for a long time, it didn't matter and nobody cared. They were being protected by a delusional, highly emotional hashtag movement that didn't feel women were capable of lying and did not want facts or evidence to be entertained. Consequently, the media and the public kowtowed to this McCarthyism of the day. For 6 years, the cognitively challenged masses, including the former DA Bruce Castor, who caught Constant in inconsistencies himself, still mysteriously kept giving Andrea Constant the benefit of the doubt, even when the evidence proved she was not legit. And to keep this narrative intact, mainstream media platforms deliberately lied to us and made it seem like she was a legitimate victim with a legitimate claim when she was not. They also made it seem like it was a rape case when that wasn't true either. Almost none of the allegations against them were truly about rape. At any rate, let's listen to what Castor knew nearly 20 years ago.
All right, as we mentioned, former Montgomery County District Attorney Bruce Castor initially decided not to charge Cosby. You heard Deanna say it. He promised him he would not be charged. I spoke with Castor literally just a few moments ago. Here's in part what he had to say.
There were problems proving the case. Some of the information we got was inconsistent, and there was a lengthy delay, which caused it so that I didn't have any opportunity to get any forensic backup. And there were various things, other things that were reported in the opinion that were troubling, continuing contact between the alleged victim and Cosby after the fact, statements that could have been used to suggest extortion. There was the possibility that she had, the alleged victim had sought legal counsel for a civil settlement before coming to the police. There were a lot of things that led me at the time to think that a prosecution would be problematic and unprovable.
And that was always the extent of the case. And now one might want to go down the rabbit hole because you might be wondering, if that was all there was, what the hell happened then? How were there 2 trials, a conviction presumably beyond a reasonable doubt, and then 2 years later, a reverse of that conviction? What is going on here? Well, for those already familiar with the channel, I already laid all of this out and explained that this case and situation is historically relevant at this point. In terms of American history, pop culture, the justice system, all across the board. But the folks on television are probably not going to tell you why. And if you ask anyone who you might think would know, chances are they too will just babble emotional, opinionated gibberish to you about how he's still guilty and that the courts failed in executing justice and all that stuff. So let's just dispense with that and let's be real and sensible. In order to tell this story, the real story you'll never hear on TV or in the media, you can't really point your finger at one thing to really capture it all. There are many tentacles and elements to this situation. Element number 1, we have false accusers and opportunists all working together in an unprecedented fashion. And why do I dare say false accusers in Me Too America? Well, because that's what the evidence says. And for those intellectually and cognitively having trouble understanding why they may be false accusers, I've already made lots of videos at this point proving this. So let me just put things in a nutshell and put things in the right perspective. The lower court judge unconstitutionally stacked the case with 5 additional women. And so he allowed the prosecution to select any 5 extra women that they wanted to select. Anyone. Again, think with me here. There were over 60 accusers. They got to select the 5 best shots of proving his guilt. So there's over 60 women of slam dunk solid cases, right? So with all those people you saw on TV and all the crying, who did the prosecution feel were the strongest cases? One of the people who made that 5-person cut was Janice Dickinson. a pathological liar who later admitted she made up her Cosby story.
You know, she really appeared to be so authentic. And I mean, her emotion, her just wanting to exactly say what happened, I think came through that camera. Let's watch a little bit of this highly, highly emotional interview that she did with CNN.
I did not know. This has affected me in my house. It's affecting me. And it has probably affected these women. But I'm strong, and I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet, and I'm going to tell my side of the story, and it's not going to end here.
Yeah. Another one of the 5 best women was Shaylin Lasha, a woman no stranger to crime and lying to law enforcement.
And he gave me this blue pill, and he said it was going to help my cold, and he gave it to me with a shot of amaretto about this big. All I remember, I laid down, and he laid next to me, and he was making this sound, and he was telling me to do it. I couldn't move my arms, I couldn't move my legs, my eyes, but it was like I could see, but I couldn't move, couldn't talk, and in my head I was saying, Dr. Huxtable.
Another one of the 5 women was Janice Baker Kinney, who admitted on the stand Bill Cosby never gave her any drugs. And like a psychopath or sociopath, even though she revealed in court that she was never drugged by Cosby, she still went on the talk shows as if she still was a victim of drugging and rape, like she alleged before she was cross-examined. And, surprise, surprise, all of the 5 had inconsistencies. They were bad testimonies. And none of the 5 had evidence or proof. And this was allowed as 404B, prior bad acts, to influence the jury. And here's another thing people may have forgotten. We now know in the second trial the judge stacked the deck with 5 additional women, because the prosecution was hoping at least one was credible enough to sway the jury. Because in the first trial, he slipped in one extra accuser, and she too was caught in lies and inconsistencies, just like all the rest. So there were really no credible accusers. None of them listened.
I'm hoping that the court will allow more prior bad act witnesses, more accusers, to be able to testify.
All right, so Richard, you were shaking your head before listening to Ms. Allred. Now what? What do you think?
I can't listen to her. It's like chalk on a blackboard. I just cannot listen to her, Fred.
Give her a break. Give her a break.
The prior bad acts, it's usually in the federal system, 404B, prior bad acts. When you seek to put that amount of information and evidence on, your case is paper thin.
Right.
So it becomes
Right.
a sideshow where the defense tries each and every one of them to try to undermine them and their credibility. And that's what happened to Miss, I can't even say her name's witness, who testified in this Cosby case. She got obliterated on cross-examination. Her testimony was negative, maybe hurt the prosecution's case.
And this is the racket that the courts and the media were running for the past few years. And we're currently living in a very dangerous society that does not understand these things, because people are indoctrinated and motivated by ideology, not logic. A man is supposed to be innocent until you prove him guilty. And when at least some of them, over a dozen, were undoubtedly caught in lies and inconsistencies, that should have been enough to reserve judgment and respect due process. Instead, you saw the system covering for all of them and treating them all the same way, which ironically exposed the whole operation. There was no truth and no integrity. They didn't care about anyone lying, facts or evidence. Because even when it was clear that another one was lying, they still kept the heat and focus on getting Bill Cosby. So this assembly of all these accusers with very old accusations with absolutely no evidence, and many of them proven to be liars, became a protected, infallible entity to bring Bill Cosby to ruin. That brings us to the next element. Assisting, organizing, and prepping these accusers for press and all sorts of things behind the scenes, you have crooked lawyers like Gloria Allred. Behind the scenes, as some of their stories changed, these women were coached and told what to say, what not to say, and all that. That's why a lot of their stories didn't start out the same. And yes, I picked all of that up and made videos about it. Element number 3, perhaps the most powerful, working in concert with them for its own interests, but consequently helping them in every way possible, was an entire women's advocacy movement, creating an emotional atmosphere where it was a major foul to doubt any woman, no matter what she said. This made up for the lack of evidence. While I'm pretty sure people were very well intentioned, to the critical thinkers, justice was being smothered. With the power of an entire movement, this collective inadvertently assisted the next element, an opportunistic DA, Kevin Steele. He ran unconstitutionally, promising to get Bill Cosby, even though he should have understood the case was dropped, settled, and gagged. But because most of American society was entranced with this fake narrative, he exploited it, placating to the mindless mobs and crowd. And then he joined forces with another element, doing the same thing, an unscrupulous judge, Stephen T. O'Neill. And simultaneously the entire time, all of these elements were assisted by another contributing element, a corrupt and dishonest media, protecting the story and the image of guilt, sensationalizing and character assassinating Bill Cosby the entire time, in a system of institutionalized racism that also assisted the narrative spin as another element. Then you have political and corporate enemies and other miscellaneous people in high places helping behind the scenes. And finally, you have a dumbed down, socially engineered populace that cannot think critically and listens to whatever they're told on TV as the court of public opinion. To this day, if you ask around, people clearly do not know anything about this case or the people accusing him, but they insist that he is guilty.
He would soon discover that in the future, justice was not only blind, but had become rather retarded as well.
Of what? They can't say specifically, but just guilty. They just insist he rapes the women because they're indoctrinated with the ideology of sexual assault victims not being believed. And they cannot break the program to think rationally about this individual case. That's why ideologues are sometimes extremely dangerous. Many of them are very well-intentioned, good-natured people, but a lot of them are also crazed zealots. But either way, many of them still behave the same. Because of emotion, they can't be rational. They insist on guilt, even though according to the law and the facts, it has not been proven. And when you explain this to them, instead of joining the cancel culture lynch mob, some of them start up with the hurling insults and the name calling, accusing you of victim blaming, loving a rapist, and all sorts of the irrational, emotional ideology comes pouring out. And that's exactly why people started coming for Felicia Rashad, who understood what happened. Her friend was falsely accused and then wrongly imprisoned in his old age. And then the courts overturned the debacle, and she showed appreciation for the justice system working for once. But today, the senseless mob is wild, programmed, overly emotional, and incorrigible. They don't get it, and they probably never will. Now, because of the conviction being overturned, like I said was going to happen, subscribers came pouring back to the channel, and some of them asked me to do a follow-up series. So this will be the first installment of that. Like previously mentioned, we are going to go down this rabbit hole. We're going to talk about good journalism and many of the bad journalists and pundits that looked right into the camera and lied. And we're finally going to have an honest conversation about the facts, the truth, and the social ramifications of this debacle. Because once again, this is not over.